Hello, my name is Mireia Guardingo. I am Head of Editorial Outreach for Web of Science, and today we are talking about the Web of Science journal evaluation process and selection criteria. The Web of Science is a publisher-independent global citation database. Dr. Eugene Garfield was our founder. He was also the inventor of the first citation index, and he based most of his work on the idea that through citation, an intellectual link is created between research works. And that is exactly what we do in the Web of Science core collection. We index journals, books, and conference proceedings of the highest quality, and we capture all of the articles with their metadata and cited references. So we are capturing all of those intellectual links that Dr. Garfield used to talk about. Because we have been doing that for many years, we have been able to construct a highly comprehensive and complete citation network that we continue to build upon today. One of the characteristics that makes us who we are is the thorough curation of our data, as well as our unique selection and evaluation processes. We have three basic principles in our selection process, which are objectivity, selectivity, and collection dynamics, and a set of 28 criteria that we use to evaluate all journals. So this is what we are talking about today. The Web of Science core collection is actually a collection of indices. We have three journal flagship indices, which are the Science Citation Index Expanded, SCIE, the Social Sciences Citation Index, SSCI, and the Arts and Humanities Citation Index, AHCI, in which we cover the most impactful journals in the sciences, the social sciences, and the arts and humanities. Then we have the ESCI, the Emerging Sources Citation Index, which covers high-quality journals in all disciplines. It provides visibility to the broader literature and includes sources that go beyond the high-impact journals. And finally, we have the PKCI, the Book Citation Index, and the CPCI, the Conference Proceedings Citation Index. Every item that is indexed in the Web of Science core collection, every article, every book, every conference proceeding, is a node in the citation network. Every document is connected to other items by citations, so it is discoverable through these connections and can lead to others. Everything is playing an equally important role in the creation of the citation network. So now that we know the internal structure of the Web of Science core collection, let's focus on the journal evaluation process and selection criteria. So first of all, who is in charge and how we do it? We are a team of professional in-house editors, and we are dedicated to the curation of the Web of Science core collection. We are not affiliated to publishers or research institutions, so we are completely independent and there are no potential conflicts of interest that may affect our decisions. Each editor of the team focuses on specific subject categories. That is important because it allows us to have a deep knowledge of each category and of the journals in each specific field. We also gather all the journal information and data ourselves during the evaluation process. The information required from publishers on submission is quite minimal. We retrieve most of the information about the journal from its website and from its published content. This allows us to get to know the journals very well, and it also ensures that the evaluation is completely independent, it is unbiased, and it is based on the transparent information that the journal is providing to its audience. As I said, the whole process is carried out by the Web of Science in-house editorial team. We do not rely on algorithms or delegate the decisions on the research community. It's all carried out by professional editors. And of course, following the principles of objectivity and selectivity, all editors use the same set of criteria. We have 24 quality criteria and 4 impact criteria to evaluate all the journals for the Web of Science core collection. And here you can see the overall context of the Web of Science core collection with the different indices that we have just talked about and the internal dynamics of the Web of Science core collection. So what happens once the editors have evaluated a journal? The journals that meet the quality criteria enter the ESCI. Journals that meet both the quality and the impact criteria enter SCIE, SSCI, or AHCI. Now keep in mind that the whole collection is dynamic. This is what the arrows on the right-hand side of the workflow show. So journals can move from one index to another depending on their impact. In that way, an ESCI journal that gains impact moves to a flagship collection, and a flagship journal that loses impact will move to ESCI. Now, very important, journals can be removed from the whole collection if they lose quality. If journals don't continue to meet with the quality criteria, indexing will be discontinued. Just to give you a bit more information on where we are focusing our efforts at the moment, the current focus of the editorial team is on evaluating journals for quality rather than impact. So we are prioritizing new journals submitted for evaluation in parallel with ensuring we remove any content from the Web of Science that no longer meets our quality criteria. So at the moment, all new journals that are submitted all new journals selected for coverage are added to ESCI, and no impact evaluations are being performed. So here's a complete overview of the whole process that we use and all the criteria. You can see there are 3 levels of evaluation. There's the initial triage, the editorial triage, and the editorial evaluation, which actually has 2 parts, the quality and the impact. We have 24 quality criteria that we evaluate first, and those are essential to be fulfilled by any journal that is indexed in the Web of Science core collection. With these criteria, we address editorial rigor and publishing best practices. And then we have 4 additional impact criteria that need to be met by journals in the flagship collections, and these are the ones that are on hold at the moment. Keep in mind that the 24 quality criteria are selective, but they are not competitive. We do not consider journal performance or recognition during that part of the evaluation. We are looking for best editorial practice. On the other hand, the 4 impact criteria are competitive. This is where we compare journals to each other and we look for a high and sustainable influence. So when we receive a journal, we start at initial triage. We will start reviewing the different criteria at this stage. And unless all criteria are met, here we will not move on to the next part of the evaluation. So journals need to meet all criteria at initial triage before we can start editorial triage. And that applies to all of these levels. Journals need to meet all criteria in each stage in order to move on to the next one. So let's look at the stages and the quality criteria in detail. So this is the first step. We have received the journal submission and we are at initial triage. This step is based on information that publishers provide when the journal is submitted, and its purpose is to ensure that we have unambiguously identified the journal and that we have all the information that we need to initiate an evaluation. So this translates into 7 criteria. First, the journal needs to have a registered ISSN that is clearly displayed on the journal and the website, and that can be checked in the ISSN portal. The title of the journal needs to be distinctive. It needs to be descriptive of the journal's content and also consistent with the ISSN register and with all of the content of the journal website and the published material. We also need to be able to clearly identify the publisher of the journal. For that, we need the name, of course, but we also need an address, a physical address. Just an email or a phone number are not enough. We need the location of the business offices of the publisher. And also, if the journal is published together with a scholarly society, this should be clearly informed on the website and include contact details. We also need a valid and unique URL, so a journal website. And very important, we need access to all of the published content. So if the journal is an open access publication, that is not a problem. We can access the content just like any other reader would do. There are no additional arrangements to be made. If it's not an open access publication, if it's a hybrid or a subscription journal, we can provide our IP ranges to the publisher so they can give us access to via IP authentication, or the publisher can provide us with a username and a password that we can use to access the full text online via their website or their publishing platform. But this is completely essential. We cannot initiate an evaluation if we don't have access to the content. The journal also needs to have a peer review policy in place, and this should be clearly stated on the website. This is vital. All journals indexed in the Web of Science core collection need to be peer reviewed. And finally, we need a contact from the journal to be able to communicate with whenever we need to. If once we complete this part of the evaluation, one or more of these criteria are not met, we will communicate that to the contact, and as soon as these have been resolved, the journal can be submitted again for evaluation. Otherwise, if everything is correct and all criteria are met, we move on to the next evaluation step, which is editorial triage. Now, the aim of the editorial triage step is to determine if the journal meets the minimum requirements that justify a complete and deep evaluation of the content. So here we focus on format criteria, on how the content of the journal is provided to the reader, and also on the policies of the journal. We have 9 quality criteria at this stage. The first one is the scholarly content. The journal needs to publish primarily scholarly content. By that we mean original research results, reviews, case studies. Journals may have other content as well. They are very likely to include editorials, commentaries, news, etc. But the content needs to be primarily original scholarly material addressed to professional researchers. The titles and the abstracts should appear at least in English. Keep in mind that the Web of Science is directed towards a global audience, and titles and abstracts are the minimum information that any user anywhere in the world needs to have in order to use the data in Web of Science fully and extract all of the information from it. That does not mean that other languages are excluded. Of course not. We index journals that publish in many languages, but for journals that publish in a language that is not English, then the English translation of titles and abstracts needs to be provided. Then we have the references and the bibliographic information, which need to appear in Roman script. This is essential to construct the citation network of the Web of Science, and it is also very valuable information for the users, which again are a global community. Of course, the content of the journal need to be clearly readable and comprehensible. This is what the clarity of language criterion focuses on. This applies to, of course, the published articles in the journal, but also to any text that is available on the journal website. Then we have timeliness and publication volume. By timeliness, we mean that the journal needs to adhere to its own publication schedule, meaning that, for example, if a journal says it's a quarterly publication, we will expect to see a new issue being published every 3 months. That shows a solid editorial management and good planning of the content of the journal. At this point of the evaluation, we also look at the publication volume, which is the number of items published per year. And this volume should be in agreement with the research area of the journal. The journal website needs to be friendly, it needs to be easy to navigate through. All of the information about the journal should be easily accessible, and it should also be accurate and up to date. Then we focus on the ethics statement, on the ethical statements and guidelines that the journal has and which need to be very clear. Here we are talking, for example, about policies regarding the declaration of possible conflicts of interest, research involving animals or humans, the protocols that the journal has in place to deal with alleged misconduct, handling of corrections and retractions, etc. The journal needs to be very clear on those policies and those guidelines and make sure that these principles are being applied. And finally, it is very important that both authors and editors of the journal can be correctly identified. Therefore, their names, their full affiliation, and their country or region of work for both authors and editors needs to be provided. So for editors, this is normally included in a dedicated section of the website. And for authors, it is specified in each one of the publications. If at the end of this part of the evaluation, one or more of the 9 criteria are not met, the journal will not pass editorial triage. And in such case, there's 2 possible situations. If the journal does not pass editorial triage in its first evaluation, there is no embargo period for resubmission. So the journal can be resubmitted once the issues pointed out in the evaluation have been solved. If the journal is resubmitted and fails editorial triage again, so for a consecutive time, we may apply an embargo period of 1 year. If all the criteria on this step are met, then we would continue with the journal evaluation. So now we move on to the editorial evaluation and we start with the quality part. This is where we go into the details of the published articles. What we are mainly looking for here is coherence within the journal and editorial rigor. So in terms of criteria, there are 8 at this part of the evaluation. First of all, the editorial board composition. We will look at the members of the editorial board, their distribution by country or region, the publications, and the citation network around them. What we want to see here is that they are active members of the research community and that their expertise is aligned with the scope of the journal. We also consider if the expertise of the board members covers the full scope of the journal at this point. Then we have the validity of statements criterion. When we evaluate this criterion, first we want to make sure that all the claims made by the journal are accurate. And also we check if the ethical statements and guidelines that we were talking about before in the previous step of the evaluation are actually being applied. So this means, for example, if the journal requests a conflict of interest statement in all of its articles, we will check if the papers include such a statement. That is just an example. We also look for evidence of an adequate peer review as it reflects on the quality of the published articles. So what we do here is see if there are any indications of a poor peer review process. So for example, if we see articles that don't fit the scope of the journal or that cite papers that don't match the content of the articles, these kind of observations can be a sign that something is not working as it should during the peer review process. The next criterion is content relevance, and here we check the coherence within the journal. So we make sure that the title, the aims and scope, and the actual content published in the journal are all coherent. Then we have the grant support details criterion. This is where we look at the information of the funding. We are referring to the funding received by the research described in the article, so the research projects. This is not a mandatory criterion. We know that not all of the articles can be associated to a specific funding, but it is important information. On one hand, it's important because it indicates that a funding agency evaluated the research project and they considered it important and valuable enough to receive funding. So that is an added value of the research that is described in those articles. Also, the funding information is indexed in Web of Science, so including it enriches our database. We know it's information that the users of the Web of Science value and use, and we want to be able to provide it to them. By adherence to community standards, we mean the correct use of established standards in the research community in terms of format and best practices. So the application of guidelines provided by recognized international organizations and widely accepted by the research community, for example, is something that we look at. The use of specific notations, etc. These kind of international conventions. Next, we have author distribution, and here we will look on one hand at the geographic distribution of authors, which needs to be aligned with the scope of the journal itself. And on the other hand, we check if the authors are part of the scholar community of that research area. And finally, we look at the citations in the journal. Those are the citations that the journal we are evaluating does to other journals or to itself. Here we are looking for a good use of citations, and we want to ensure that they are relevant to the articles and that they acknowledge the surrounding literature of the topic. So if once we complete this analysis, there's one or more criteria that are not met, we will communicate that to the journal. If this phase of the evaluation is failed, the journal is subject to 2 years of embargo. That means that it cannot be reevaluated in the next 2 years. This is because, as you have seen, this analysis goes a lot deeper into the content of the journal and the editorial management of the journal, and we consider that the changes that need to be implemented in order to meet our criteria at this point require a longer time to be applied and to become consistent. If, on the contrary, all of the criteria are met, then the journal fulfills all of our 24 quality criteria, and it will be accepted for indexing in the Web of Science core collection. The journal evaluation process has one last step, which is the impact evaluation. I will not go into the details of the impact criteria as these are currently on hold, but there is information available on our website if you are interested in learning more about these. So let's recap. We have already seen all of the 24 quality criteria, and a journal that meets all of them would be indexed in ESCI. As we said at the beginning of the presentation, the Web of Science collections are dynamic. However, impact evaluations are on hold, so we are not moving journals from ESCI to the flagship collections or vice versa at the moment. Our current focus is on quality, so let me briefly talk to you about the quality reevaluations and journal deselection. So as I mentioned earlier on, index journals that lose quality and don't continue to meet with the quality criteria will be deselected for coverage. If there are concerns regarding an index journal, the journal will be reevaluated according to the same selection criteria that I have just described. Depending on the outcome of the evaluation, the journal may be removed from coverage if it no longer meets the quality criteria, or it will remain covered if it continues to meet the quality criteria. It is important to keep in mind that we use the same set of criteria, the 24 quality criteria, to reevaluate journals for quality. All our editorial decisions are based on this single set of selection criteria. So that would be all for the journal evaluation in the Web of Science core collection. You've seen it is a very well-structured process that really gets into the details of the journal itself and that is currently focused on the quality of the journals. It is important to remember that the quality evaluation is selective, but it is not competitive. It focuses on the characteristics of the journal itself and its editorial processes. If you want to learn more about the journal evaluation process, please visit our website where you can find a full description of the editorial process and the selection criteria. You can also find information about the books and CPCI selection processes on our editorial policies. That is all from me. Thank you so much for your attention.